Hello and welcome to the Make Your Own Noise podcast. My name is Jack Negro and thank you for joining me today. You'll have to ignore for a start the background noise. I'm currently sitting at the most beautiful lookout in Bali at the Bali time chamber where I'm staying, and there's constant crickets, birds, roosters and a waterfall in the background, but I thought it was cool and it helped set the scene for today's podcast. Today's podcast is Post-Study Overwhelm. Transitioning out of study and deciding your next steps. So you've just finished or you're about to finish your studies and you feel completely lost about what to do next as you deal with the overwhelm of the many choices and pathways you could take. First of all, this is completely normal and a very common feeling to have. I see so many of my talented, amazing students have this issue, family members and friends in various creative fields as well. And, you know, you've come from the structure of education into the endless daily choices of the real world. You've come from the guidance in a curriculum to having to self-motivate and do your own scheduling. You've gone from having set tasks made for you to needing to go out and set your own goals and to-do lists. And this can be incredibly overwhelming and a big shift for many people. So how do we deal with this intense feeling of overwhelm? How do we let fear not stop us, let aspiration motivate us? Where and how do we even start? Regardless of which creative professional field you wish to enter, I'll do my best to answer these questions for you today. So in today's podcast, I've got three main points I want to talk about. The first point is how to deal with this overwhelm of transitioning out of study into the industry. The second is the practical first steps you can take to get started. And the third is the key things to remember through the start of your professional journey. And they are the things that I want to go through today with you. So let's start with the first one, being how to deal with overwhelm and transitioning out of study into the industry. One of the biggest challenges many face in the creative fields after they've finished their studies is the feelings of overwhelm and feeling lost. The endless potential choices and pathways can actually have an opposing effect on our mindset. And instead of being excited by the many choices and pathways we could take, it can actually freeze us from taking any action as we experience choice overwhelm. And that can be a really frustrating feeling. I think frustrating is the right word to use. So what are some of these things we can do to help us deal with and minimize these emotions as we transition out of study and into the industry? The first one is look ahead to engage in the industry while you're still studying to help smooth the transition. So let me just repeat that. Look ahead to engage in the industry while you are still studying to help smooth the transition. Now, I know some of you listening have already finished studying. Don't let that deter you. It's the same process, and I understand some degrees are just so full on you just do not have time. But either way, what I'm talking about here to engage in the industry is internships, work experience, working for free. You may not have a huge skill set or amount of experience to offer a company or a client yet, but you do have your time and your energy, and that is worth a lot. That makes you valuable still. If you have finished studying already, like I said, this can apply to you as well. Many of the interns and assistants I have at my studio and in past studios I've managed are graduates as well. The next point, set aside time in your week for working on something related to your industry. So you've just finished studying. You should have extra time in your week to be working on something related to your industry. You'd have no more assessments, no more in-class tutorials to be at. You should have extra time. You should be replacing some of that time with engaging in the industry, preferably all of that time if you can. I'll go through some examples more about this process shortly, but don't fall into the trap of using all of this new spare time to earn money in your job that is not related to where you want to go. This should help smooth the transition out of studying as your week still has a good chunk of time dedicated towards your career, like when you were studying. So such a common thing I see is a full-time student will finish, they were working 3 to 4 days a week at Coles while studying, they finish up, they got more time, shifts open up, more money, off they go. Yep, I'll do my music stuff on the weekend. They get burnt out, they get tired, they don't do it. So when you finish, and I know some people have different circumstances and this can be tricky, but really think about the balance of where you spend your time that is not related to where you want to go. So I would say to these students, you have this newfound time. You now have 4 extra days a week. Maybe you do take 1 extra shift or 2, but really dedicate some of this free time to your future and your industry. Whether that's reaching out to bands if you're a producer, whether that's writing and rehearsing more if you're an artist, whether that is hitting up artists on socials if you want to be an artist manager, interning, work experience for free, whatever it is, really keep time aside that is now freed up for your future. The third thing I wanted to talk about here is recognize these feelings are normal and that you are not the only one who feels this way. So I'll repeat that. Recognize these feelings are normal and that you are not the only one that feels this way. The recognition of the feeling alone and its commonality can help you get out of your head and understand it's okay to feel this way. It doesn't make you a loser who doesn't know what they want to do yet, and you'll never find what you want to do. We just need a few practical steps to get us started, which I'm about to talk about in a moment. But really understand how common this feeling is. It is so understandable that you've come from all this structure and this world where everything's laid out in front of you and things are exciting and happening. Now all of a sudden it's done. It's all on you to make your own schedules, your own to-do list, set your own goals. That can be so scary, but I promise you a fair majority of people feel this way, and you just need to recognize that in itself, understand it is human, and try and push through from there. So let's talk about some practical first steps you can take to get started. So what are some actual practical first steps you can take whether you're still studying or you've now completed? I want you to look ahead 10 years for yourself, and we're going to work backwards from there. Put time aside, minimize distractions such as your phone, the TV, your housemates. Take some time to clearly focus and think about what you want and what your future can look like. We never actually take that time for ourselves without distracting ourselves constantly. And it's hard to not distract yourselves with the amount of stimulus around. Take yourself to a park, set up in your hammock, set up in your study. Just put your phone away and have some space to yourself and give yourself some time. Think about what you want, who you want to be, and how you want to make a living. So the first step, you're laying in your hammock or you're in a park or whatever. I want you to think about where you want to be in 10 years, what you want to be doing, how you want to be feeling. I like to call this vision my North Star. This is the big picture and high-level thinking statement. Don't get too bogged down yet in specifics such as how much money and other things, just an overarching statement of what you want for yourself in 10 years' time. Where do you want to be? Some examples of that might be, I want to earn a full-time living producing and mixing music. Or I want to start my own graphic design company and have a team of designers work for me. Or I want my music to be able to generate enough income for me to live happily and healthily and travel around the country or overseas playing shows. Or I want to be known as one of those creative music videographers in the country. Okay, so that's our North Star. We have our North Star, our overarching high-level statement that we want to declare that we are working towards. From here, we will begin breaking this down into 2 key things. We need to break this 10-year vision down into specific goals with measurable outcomes. Once we have our specific goals and outcomes, we can put steps in place. Okay, so what are some examples of some specific goals with measurable outcomes? Let's say in my example, it's in 10 years' time, I want to be earning a full-time living producing and mixing music. Okay, that's my North Star. So the goals will start being, I either need to be working at a studio, be renting a studio, or have my own studio. I need to be able to work and charge this much money to work with this many bands, and I will need this much equipment. Do you see how we're starting to get quite specific and we're starting to break this down? Once you have done this for your 10-year plan, come 5 years closer and do the same thing for your 5-year plan. So what are your measurable goals and specific outcomes for 5 years' time? The specific goals and outcomes you are after should be aligning to your 10-year plan. Then do the same for the 1-year plan, which should break down to what you can start doing today or this week. So let's just go over that one more time. You've got your 10-year plan, the high level, where you want to be, what you want to be doing. You have your 5-year plan and your 1-year plan, and each of these plans has specific goals with measurable outcomes, okay? Not just a goal that's don't know when you've achieved it or not. You have a goal and you know you've achieved that goal because there is a measurable outcome you can put next to it. Okay? Put this in a document, write it down in your journal, visualize it in front of you. And at the end of your 1 year plan, you should be able to go, I need to do this in the next week. I need to apply for an internship. I need to hit up this many bands. I need to buy my first camera. I need to start looking at events companies I can get involved with and offer my time. That's where you should be. Another point I want to talk about here, when you're making these 10, 5 and 1 year plans, I want you to keep this quote in mind. Bill Gates once said, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. I love this quote so much because it's a nod to one of my core beliefs too, that consistent small efforts that are directed and clear are far more effective than one huge decision, a holy grail, a shoot your shot. And I've seen so many of my former students and other people get disheartened because within 1 year of studying, they're not earning a full-time living yet doing what they're doing. And they become disheartened when they're actually on the right path. They're starting to record bands. They're starting to do live sound. They're starting to play some cool shows and get good support. And they get disheartened and they don't see that if they keep pushing through and they stick to those, constantly checking their 10 and 5 year plans and where they want to be going and adapting and changing on their way, but consistently working towards them, you can do phenomenal things in 10 years. For me, for those that don't know my story, 10 years was when I launched my first studio, and my first 2 years were interning and working for free, and then it worked to, earning a little bit of money and charging bands a bit of money. And then about 7 years in, I went freelance full-time. I was generating my own income, which then allowed me to save. And in 10 years, I built my own studio. If you had asked me 10 years ago when I was interning and assisting, would I own my own studio? I probably wouldn't have even dreamt that I could do that yet. But consistent efforts, and I knew where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be recording, producing and mixing music full time. And I just stuck to it. And you don't even notice your own growth sometimes. And I just want you to have that quote ringing in your head when you have that moment of doubt. If this all feels too much and you don't even know where you want to start, what you want, you've tried sitting down and thinking about it, and it only makes you feel more frustrated or lost, then I want you to try absolutely anything remotely related to your industry. You might want to get into recording and producing music like I did, and this is what I did, but there was an opportunity to do live sound through a company that I got through uni, so I did it. And I met a great artist doing that, and I asked if she wrote originals, and she did, and I recorded her debut EP. It was my major work for my uni. It sounded great, and it was the start of my portfolio. You might have just finished a music composition degree. Maybe you want to get into more film, but you noticed there was a digital agency that needed music composition for podcasts and advertisements, and you got into that and you actually quite enjoyed it. Throw yourself into anything. There's so many jobs that you don't even know exist. Expose yourself to it. Nothing in that nature, if it's related to what you do, is wasted, and it's still better than sitting there doing nothing. And I know how hard that first step is if you're in that place, that unmotivated, overwhelmed place. But you can't always sit there and think yourself into a motivated state to take action. I'll just repeat that. You can't always sit there and think yourself into a motivated state to take action. Sometimes you need to just act, even when you're afraid or you don't want to, but that action creates a reaction, which can be the feeling of motivation, which can then drive you into more action, and the cycle begins. So again, don't try and sit there and think yourself into being motivated. Take action when you don't want to. Watch the reaction come from that, which will be motivation. You will feel the wheels turning and moving forward, and all of a sudden you're doing it before you even realize. Again, coming back to that point, consistent small steps in a clear direction are key. Be patient and trust that every effort will be rewarded. So I want to talk about a final thing to leave you with. I guess you would call this the mindset part of this episode. Some key things to remember through the start of your professional journey. So these might be some things you want to write down that I'm constantly reminding myself and referring to. And hopefully you are writing things down soon as you do your 10, 5 and 1 year plans with your specific goals and measurable outcomes. Anyway, let's talk about a few key things that I want to share with you to remember in these early stages. The first thing, Recognize early that for many in the creative fields, you will not instantly be earning a full-time living doing what you're doing. For many, it can take years to build your skill set, your reputation, your portfolio, and your client base. This is where so many people feel disheartened and lose motivation because they feel like a failure, that they are still yet to break free from their part-time job after finishing their studies. And I've seen this happen so many times, as I said before, that all they needed to do was to continue on the path and trajectory they were on, and they get too disheartened. They take more money and more stuff from their part-time job, and they lose motivation and momentum in their creative side, and it falls away. And they were on the right trajectory the whole time. The next key thing I just want to talk about is your progress will not be linear. I'll just repeat that. Your progress will not be linear. You will have periods of rapid growth. You will also have setbacks, challenges, losses, letdowns. There will also just be periods of consolidation. Maybe nothing too much new is happening. But these moments are great too, as they are chances to experiment and evaluate. For myself, I've had moments where tracks are going really well and getting lots of inquiries. I've had other times where it feels a little slower. I've had times where I've had setbacks and lost mixes. I've had times where I've won mixes and won jobs, and your progress is not linear. Another key thing I want you to remember is not only will we have our ups and downs throughout, but you're also likely to have opportunities present themselves to you and pivot along the way. Even though we have our 10-year plans, we may find something comes along that excites us even more, and we start heading in that direction because it feels right. That is completely normal and a fantastic thing. Matthew McConaughey in his book Green Lights refers to those moments as his green lights, the signs from the universe that feel right and you know deep down you should pursue. So I hope today's podcast has helped you. I hope it's helped you at first deal with the overwhelm that you might be experiencing as you transition out of study or you finish studying. I hope I've given you some practical first steps that you can take today to get started. And I hope maybe some of the key things that I left you with have helped as well. And you can come back to those in these early periods of your professional journey. So for those of you there that are struggling with this lack of motivation and you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed, I feel you. And I really hope today helped. A final thing I want to leave you with is you'll never eradicate doubt and fear from your life completely. If you're constantly pushing and progressing, then those feelings will naturally arise. But you can learn to manage these feelings by recognizing them for what they are, just thoughts completely created in your mind, and choosing to continue forward regardless. I've said this in other podcasts too. When these moments of fear and uncertainty arise, it's a good sign that you are pushing yourself and growing. And my final thing, if you work towards clear, specific goals based on a future that inspires you and aligns to your values, amazing opportunities will enter your life in ways you cannot even imagine yet. So again, I hope today's podcast brought some value to you. Please let me know your thoughts, and I really want to hear from you. So yeah, I'm going to go enjoy the rest of this beautiful Bali day and go for a run and jump in the sauna. And yeah, thanks again for listening. It means the world to me to be able to share this, and I can't wait to hear from you all. Get out there, make your own noise, and I will see you next time.